Hey everyone, good to see you. Here I am back in my spot. This is my spot and it feels so good. It's, doesn't feel like fall outside, but we are at the end of summer. My kids went back to school today. I know a lot of your kids have gone back to school. There's a lot about that, like getting up early again and making lunches and getting back on a routine. But right now I'm feeling really grateful to be at my house and getting back into a routine. I think that summer is long. It's a long thing to have your kids home without routine. So anyway, that's what's happening in my world. And I'm happy to be back here with you guys doing the usual. On Tuesdays, we talk in English about immigration updates, news updates, answering your live questions, talking about ways that you can help. And then on Thursdays, we're doing the same thing, pero en español. So today is our English show. And as you guys know, I'm an immigration lawyer. I'm based in Austin, Texas, but immigration law is federal and my firm is virtual. And so we take clients all over the 50 United States and we can help people all over the globe. So we're also still offering our free consultations right now. And we're only booking about 2 days out on the consultations. So if you or someone you know needs a free consultation for legal advice about immigration, please send them our way. We'd be happy to help. We talk about in these consultations, not just, what legal options you have and how much it costs and what the timeline is. That's always a big part of the conversation. But we also talk about what ways that you can protect yourself and important documents and answering other questions that you might have during that consultation. An example of important documents, I was having a conversation last night with a congressman who called me and was sharing with me the difficulty that they have in his office helping people who have lost their relatives who have gone missing, but are presumably detained by ICE. Because when someone gets picked up by ICE, unless you have their A number and they're in the system, it can be really hard to find them. And there can be a few days where they're missing. And if you don't have their A number, then you're stuck searching using their name, their biographic information, name, country of origin, date of birth. But if there's a misspelling in the system, you'll never be able to find them. So a lot of people lose their loved ones in ICE detention after these arrests happen. So this congressman was sharing with me the difficulty that they have because in order for them to do an inquiry to try to find someone, they need permission to search for that person. ICE won't even speak to them unless they have a release sign. And there's 2 forms that are only in English that the Congress people have to have signed in order to even search for someone. So we are updating our safety planning packet to include these congressional release forms, because what you can do is sign the forms, like the power of attorney and all that stuff, just sign it. Don't put the name of the congressman necessarily, but have that form already signed by any immigrant, so that if something happens and we need Congress to advocate on your behalf, then you will already have signed the form and we can get right to it. So that was something I learned yesterday. I didn't know that. So that we'll just add that to the list of things that we need to do to be prepared. It's not everything, but it can matter to have some congressional pressure and support on your case when you have someone who is detained. So anyway, there's a little tidbit for you. Okay, let's talk through some of the news of the week. Let me first touch on, this is not something that the media is talking a lot about, but us immigration practitioners are talking about some of the changes that are being hinted at within U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So we know that arrests have been happening at courthouses and at ICE check-ins. And this is primarily recent arrivals, asylum seekers, Cubans, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, many of whom entered under CBP-1 or under the parole program. They have TPS, now they file for asylum, and they're getting cases dismissed in court or getting picked up at ICE check-ins, right? We know that that's happening. So far, there has not been some large effort to detain people at their USCIS interviews. And USCIS interviews are when someone's seeking legal status by filing a form with immigration. So that would look like the N-400 citizenship form, the I-130 family petition, the I-485 adjustment of status. There's a whole slew of forms. And what the changes that we have so far in August are that USCIS, which is a neutral agency, has been historically, has a new director who is appointed by Trump. They've issued a couple of memos saying USCIS now has the authority to issue notices to appear in immigration court, right? So now they have the authority to initiate removal proceedings and expedited removals. I don't think that will hold up in court. I think there will be litigation, and I think that my guess is that the courts will find that the president can't just like grant that authority to a whole agency without some sort of rulemaking process. So, but that's occurring, and then we are seeing a lot of our I-130s set for interviews. And usually those are approved just by mail if you submit enough evidence. Sometimes they have interviews, but now we're seeing a lot of interviews for I-130s. So if you have an I-130 case pending or you're contemplating an I-130 case, do talk to an attorney. We don't yet have a lot of information for you guys about what this means. There's a spectrum. This could be a range of empty threats to more people getting detained at their interviews with the USCIS. And we kind of have to wait and watch and see. But of course, as always, I'll be sharing with you guys what we're seeing with our clients and with our colleagues who are sharing with us. So that's an update from immigration practitioners. Now let's get to the news. Alligator Alcatraz, we all know it's the facility in Florida, really horrific conditions, built basically right in the middle of a swamp. There are environmental concerns about the impact of this facility. Sorry to laugh, it's not funny. And there are human rights abuses that have been reported within the facility. So the ACLU has brought a lawsuit. There seems to be some early success or traction on that lawsuit. So that's good news. Alligator Alcatraz is getting held up in the federal court system. Like any further building at the facility has been stopped by that lawsuit for now. We have the reinforcements in DC. Of course, Trump's takeover of Washington. Part of that takeover has been immigration requiring local law enforcement in DC to cooperate with ICE. So we're going to see more enforcement activities in DC. We've seen ICE recruitment intensified. They're paying bonuses. They're paying college, like student loan forgiveness. I would caution promises of student loan forgiveness from the Trump administration, just saying. They make a lot of promises, self-deportation money. They canceled student loan forgiveness for people who work in nonprofits. I would not make a major life decision based on some promise of money by the Trump administration, is what I'm saying about that. Also, I highly recommend, this probably isn't very PC of me, I highly recommend watching South Park if you need to feel a little bit better. There's the second episode was about the recruitment of ICE for finding workers, and it was some good stuff. Definitely not PC. So I'll give you your content warning right here. But if that kind of stuff, if you need a little bit of like catharsis in a South Park style, that would be a good episode for you. Their ICE raids continue. There was a fatality in an ICE raid in California. A man was running away and he was hit by a car, young man, 50, young. And these operations, of course, are aggressive. I saw a report today that said that the impact just in California, a certain sector of California, was that the agriculture industry was down between 20 and 40%, which had an impact of around $5 billion and an increase in the cost of produce of about 10%. That's just that one little region. So we're starting to see more and more of that. The first impacts of all of this stuff that we feel are in agriculture. That's easy to see. Then we start to see it in construction. Building is down in Dallas 30%. So that's beginning. And then hospitality, restaurants are suffering. A few owners of restaurant chains in Austin have talked about the difficulties that they're experiencing, hotels, et cetera. So that's where you start to see the beginning of all of this stuff. And then as we've talked about, the other sectors will begin to be impacted. And maybe it's when industry really does start to suffer and the leaders of these industries and these sectors really start providing pressure to Washington and to Trump, like the donors, right? The donors and the lobbyists, when they're like, hey, We can't do our builds. We can't, conduct our business. That's when we might start to actually see some change. And it's why I've said all along that if you belong to some trade organization, or you're in a union, or you are, belong to some powerful group, get your group to care about this issue and advocate, because that's where the change will most likely occur. That, grassroots stuff doesn't have too much of an impact on the Trump administration. Not saying we shouldn't do it, but they care about money and power. So those are the people that have to start asking for the change. So those are the updates I have. The other stuff is pretty niche. If you have any comments, questions, thoughts on news of the week, let me know. I see the questions coming in. Keep them coming. Let's have a conversation together. I love y'all's names. Gertie, the dirty birdie. What should I do when witnessing a kidnapping by ICE? This is such a great question, so important. First thing I'll say of late is I think that everybody who is an immigrant, or who has immigrants in their car, or is a person of color, should invest in a dash cam. They're not expensive. I think you can get them for like $30, and you can put it on your car. And then if you get pulled over, the whole episode will be recorded. Like, there was a guy in Florida recently who was brutally attacked. He was doing nothing wrong, and his dash cam recorded it. And the police agency and the cops who attacked him, they got in trouble. And this guy wouldn't have been able, he was alone. He wouldn't have been able to pull out his own phone. And also sometimes that can feel aggressive. If you're the target, pulling out your phone and getting your phone in someone's face, I mean, I think you should do it, but it can feel like you're taking an aggressive action, and you may not want to do that. So dash cam it's on. You're not, getting in someone's face with a phone. But in terms of how do we witness, being a good witness is one of the ways that we resist in times like these. In my opinion, you can do trainings on witnesses. There's a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of orgs that are providing information. Know the legalities. It is legal for you to record law enforcement doing their job. So you can stand by and record what's happening. So gathering evidence is the best way to witness, primarily with video on your phone, but also who are the agents? How many are there? What clothes are they wearing? What cars are they driving? Are they identified as law enforcement? Have they provided their badge numbers? How are they treating the person? Like, write it all down and make yourself available as a witness. If there's somebody else there, give them your phone number, share your video content with them, connect with them, have them call you so that they can get back to this evidence if you're the one witnessing. Whether or not you interfere, you're not supposed to interfere, and that can ratchet up the violence. There are differences of opinion about whether people should, try to get in the way. I am of the opinion that it is risky. It will rile up law enforcement and perhaps lead to more violence. Not everybody agrees with me on that. So I'm not going to give advice on a live video about that, but in the very least, do make sure that you are a good witness, and that you can provide support to the person. Say, you don't have to say anything. Don't sign anything. What's your number? What's your mom's number? And if they're alone, they can tell you, call my mom. Her number is blah, blah, blah. And then you call mom and say, I'm watching him get picked up. I've got video. This is where we are. You can sort of help be a conduit. All of that is totally legal and recommended. Thank you for the question. Ben Noor says, I need a consultation. We're available for consultations. Just DM me and say I need a consultation, and my team will reach out and set it up for you. Our consultations are totally free right now, and they are confidential. As always, anytime you talk to a lawyer, your consultation is confidential. Your information is protected. I have a lot of people worry about this. Like, if I tell you something, are you going to tell somebody else? No. Lawyers are ethically bound to provide confidentiality to our clients forever and always. So the only time we break confidentiality is when you're planning to hurt somebody and you tell us. Otherwise, your information is safe with us. BAMF 2681. Info from New Jersey. My client just got detained at her affirmative asylum interview yesterday. 2 arrests, both dismissed. Dang. I'm so sorry to hear it. Hopefully she's bond eligible. So that's the first asylum interview arrest that I've heard of. But that's an indication that USCIS is ramping up the arrests. I'll note this person did have 2 previous arrests, but both were dismissed, meaning there was no conviction. And as we know, immigration defines criminal very broadly. Someone who had a brush with law enforcement in the past, I'd be a criminal in their eyes. So people who have minor infractions, one of the dreamers who was detained had a traffic ticket mailed to their house and they hadn't responded. And then they're labeled violent criminals, right? That's what that Levitt and, Trump and everybody, they'll go on Homan, et cetera. They'll say like, oh, we're only going after the criminals, but they're talking about people who have dismissed arrests or traffic tickets that they didn't pay. So thanks for that info. Yeah, any other lawyers or anybody else who knows what's happening at interviews, please do send me DMs if you don't want to comment publicly. Tell me what you're seeing and I'll start sharing, the perspective that I have based on all of this. Ivan Rocha, Facebook, how long does it take to get a pardon through a U visa? Well, a long time. So the U visa process is you first get the certification from law enforcement that you were a victim of a qualifying crime and you've been helpful in the investigation. And that can take several months. That depends upon the police or the prosecutors or whatever agency you're getting the certification from. Then you have 6 months once you have the certification to file for the U visa. The U visa right now, they only give 10,000 a year, and there are hundreds of thousands of cases pending. So the actual U visa, the last approval I saw had waited 9 years from application to approval. But about halfway through that, you get a bona fide work permission. So you get a work permit, and your waiver should be approved by the end of that. So I would say there isn't some specific separate process for the waiver, but the waiver is part of the overall approval that's taking about a decade in total. But you should be able to get a work permit before that occurs. Okay, Gertie, what can we do about the conditions at Alligator Alcatraz? Talk about it, share it on social media, talk to your friends about it, call your representatives, your legislators. You've got senators and a U.S. Congress, and you want to call them and say, I'm your constituent. I don't like this. I'm concerned about these conditions. I don't want more facilities like this. I want congressional oversight. I want you to go and visit, and then share it and talk about it. I think one of the things that is at risk, for all of this is the desensitization that we might start to have when we see these horrific videos just coming in on our feeds, and we either get, accustomed to it or we look away because it's awful. And we can't. It's part of our duty, in my opinion. It's part of our responsibility and our duty to share this stuff and to not get desensitized and to stay angry and stay active. So talk about it. Be loud. Be loud. Instagram, Wes Carroll, did they change the interview requirements for the N400? No. The N400 is the citizenship exam interview. That's pretty set. It's statutory. It can't be changed by policy change or a memo. Eligibility for citizenship or naturalization is you've had your green card for 5 years or 3 if you're married to a U.S. citizen, and you've had good moral character. You don't owe any large tax debts. You don't owe any large child support debts. You don't have any criminal history in the last 5 years, and you pass the citizenship exam, which is a test that's 100 possible questions. They randomly select 10 of that list of 100, and then you have to answer 6 correctly. And then there's a small reading and writing section. It's not a hard test if you prepare. So no changes there. En español, Morelia, los videos en vivo en español son los jueves en la mañana. So nos vemos el jueves en español. Tuesdays are English. I do English updates and questions. And jueves, Thursday, estamos en vivo en español. Zendient Entertainment. What is being done for federal agents who are not identifying themselves upon arrest? Secondly, by law, do law enforcement need to show a warrant for arrest? These are really, really great questions. And, as we know, we've had historically just a reliance on constitutional protections and probable cause for arrest and being able to deny entry without a warrant. And we've seen ICE consistently violate people's constitutional rights. So the era that we're in now is about, yes, what are our rights, but also contemplating what happens if our rights are violated by the very people who are supposed to be enforcing the laws, because frankly, that's happening. So in terms of the first question, federal agents who are not identifying themselves, there is a law that says that they have to identify themselves when they arrest someone. And this is for obvious reasons. I mean, we're seeing reports of vigilantes who are not law enforcement agents sexually assault women. They're like ordering ice vests on Amazon and attacking women. And so, of course, law enforcement should take off their mask, identify themselves, have a badge, show that they are really part of a law enforcement agency. That is not occurring in every jurisdiction. And so we're seeing different states and localities raise laws that say that law enforcement must identify themselves. So this is going to be rapidly shifting and changing, and it will depend upon the jurisdiction where you live. There's no federal law, and certainly we wouldn't see ICE as an agency establish its own policy not to mask right now. So I did a video yesterday about interesting how the anti-maskers have now become maskers, isn't it? Secondly, by law, the question is, do law enforcement need to show a warrant for arrest? No, they don't need a warrant to arrest someone. They need probable cause to arrest someone. They are definitely arresting people without probable cause. There's racial profiling going on. People are getting pulled over if they look Hispanic. And the problem is that ICE can detain someone for being undocumented. So the police might make the stop depending upon the jurisdiction where you are, and then they call ICE, and then ICE suspects the person is undocumented and they make the arrest. And then the whole question about probable cause gets a little vague and lost. And this is why I say, get a dash cam, be good witnesses, because we want evidence from the beginning of the episode. Did this person get pulled over? Why did they get pulled over? What did the police officer say to them? How quickly did ICE show up? What did ICE say? These are all things that become relevant after the fact. The justice comes later in a lot of these situations. So no, they don't need a warrant to arrest someone. They need a warrant, a judicial warrant to enter private property. So that's someone's home or the private section of a business. So that's the way that you are most protected when you are in your home or you are in a business that is protecting you, that has if you work in a restaurant and then you're in the kitchen and there's a manager out front who's not going to let just any old person, including law enforcement, into the kitchen, then you're protected. But they don't need a warrant. If you're out on the street, they don't need a warrant to arrest you. They need probable cause. Sean, Instagram, why is the I-130 petition not being decided within the standard 14 and a half months? The USCIS website has conflicting details from 14 and a half to 89 months. I know, I looked up some processing times the other day and I was like, these are bananas. So the I-130 is the family petition. That's when you have a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident petitioning for an immigrant relative. And there's all sorts of relatives, right? So we have U.S. citizens petitioning for spouse, parent, or child. That's an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. And there's no wait time for your priority date. It's just the processing time of the paperwork. Those still take about a year. But then when you get into the other categories where you're an adult child of a U.S. citizen or you're the spouse of a permanent resident, you have the I-130, but you also have to wait your turn in line for the priority date to become available. And those wait times can be really, really long, decades even sometimes. In those types of cases for the I-130, when we're talking about a non-immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, the processing time expands. And part of the reason is USCIS says, well, we don't have to prioritize the approval of these because that person's waiting for their priority date anyway. So those are the ones that we see the longer processing time on typically. But I agree, the processing times on the I-130 has started to get concerning to me as well. Solanli y Isabel. TikTok. The judge closed my case as terminated. I already have my green card and can travel without problems. Technically, yes, based on these facts that you're sharing with me, terminated removal proceedings, approved green card, you should be okay to travel as long as you have a valid passport from your country. I would definitely have your lawyer take a look at everything, because sometimes your proceedings were administratively closed but not terminated, which means technically they're still open. So we'd want to check the EOIR system and make sure that it's actually terminated and provide a printout of that so that when you come through Border Patrol, you've got proof of that. I'll also note, this reminds me of a new change that we've just realized, which is that the EOIR system, which is the court system, is no longer providing the location or the date or the time of hearings. Actually, just kidding. They're providing the date and the time of a person's hearing, but not the location or the name of the judge. And I'm sure this is because they think that they're protecting the judges, but now people aren't going to know where to go to court or which judge they have. So that's going to be really problematic. So heads up, that's like as of yesterday, and we're watching this really closely. And it's like, this is the same thing about the ICE agents wearing the masks. They will say, well, we have to wear the mask because if we show our faces, then we're going to get doxxed online. Same thing for the judges. Like, that's why they're not showing which court or which judge it is, because they're protecting. I'm sure that they will say it's because they're protecting the judges. Our response as a community to that is stop abusing people's human rights and you won't get doxxed online. Let's bring back some justice here, and then everybody can just go along. And, notice that 8 months ago, there was no doxing occurring against ICE agents or judges. So, I don't know. Seems to me there's a better solution to get us to the point where officials who are enforcing the laws legally aren't worried about their safety. Zandy via Instagram. Thank you. RE, checking jurisdictions. Is that for if it's legal for these agents to present ID? Yeah, so what I was saying about it being jurisdiction specific is the legality of whether law enforcement has to identify. So there is a law that says that law enforcement has to identify themselves when they're conducting an arrest. I looked this up recently. I can't remember if it's in the federal statute or where it was, but it is required that law enforcement must identify themselves when they're detaining someone. That's a law. The thing that's not settled is whether ICE agents can cover their faces and wear plain clothes, or whether their clothing has to identify which agency they're from. So there are some states that have, I think, pending but not passed legislation, like New York for sure had one, maybe New Jersey. They're popping up where in both directions, right? There's stuff popping up about law enforcement must uncover their faces when they're conducting enforcement actions. And then there's other, red states that are providing more like protection for law enforcement, which is why I say, these are the things that we have to sort of just stay up to date with where we live, and it's going to be ever changing. But it is safe to say that if law enforcement is conducting an arrest, they legally must identify themselves and which agency they're with to the person that they're arresting. They don't have to tell the crowd, right? So you see some of these videos where everybody's like, identify yourselves, and they're going to just ignore. They're going to be like, get back and stop talking to me. But they do have to identify themselves to the person they are arresting. Adelita, this is a Spanish question. I'll read it and answer it in Spanish, and then I will say it in English. Si tengo varias entradas, ¿por qué empleador ofrecía buen trabajo y fue abusos o eso tengo castigo permanente? Él rogaba viniera con esto, visité con castigo permanente. Sí, Adelita, sí puede perdonar el castigo permanente con la visa T. So this is a person who has entries and exits and then suffered abuse at the workplace. And so they're asking if the T visa, which is the visa for victims of trafficking. Trafficking is not just what you think of. Like when you think of trafficking, of course, you think of like young girls kidnapped and forced into prostitution and carted around to different locations. That, of course, is trafficking. But trafficking under the federal definition is anytime somebody has worked under conditions of force, fraud, or coercion. So fraud, think lies. Coercion, think threats. Anytime somebody's worked under conditions like that, they could be eligible for a T visa. So it could be a restaurant worker who suffered threats and lies. It could be a construction worker who never got paid. It could be a restaurant. Did I say that? Restaurant worker, nanny. Lots of different types of jobs could lead to eligibility for the T visa. And one of the great things about the T visa is that it's a humanitarian program, which has lots of exceptions or waivers for entries, exits, criminal history, etc. A lot of these humanitarian type cases allow people who can't get legal status through employment or family still get legal status through a humanitarian application. So this is another reason why I say just because, 10 years ago you went for a consultation with your boyfriend and the lawyer said, no, you can't get legal status because you came and went, a few times when you were a kid. First of all, policies change regularly. So you need to update your information at least annually. Second of all, other things might have happened in your life. Since that time, you might have suffered abuse from that boyfriend. You might have had an abusive workplace situation. Other things might have occurred that made you eligible for a humanitarian case. So don't just because one time some lawyer told you you're not eligible for anything, decide that that's it for me. Please, please, please keep updating yourself because you might become eligible for something or some policy might change. This is ever changing, this area of the law. Oh, we've got a good action tip of the week. Before I get to that, will you guys if you have any final comments or questions, go ahead and put them in because I'm wrapping up. Before we get to the action tip, I'll answer one pending question and then I'll take a couple more questions if I get them in. My family is applying for asylum, but I want to leave the United States. My adult child wants to stay legally. What options do we have? So your adult child needs to file their own asylum application is what needs to happen. Presumably they were already included on your application, but then maybe they aged out when they turned 21. But an adult child cannot be a derivative of a parent's asylum application. Once you're 21, you have to have your own application anyway. So I have questions about whether you're in the affirmative process or the detained process. Removal defense process. And so that will change how, like the logistics of how you apply for yourself, but you definitely need to apply for yourself. Okay, last question here from Coach Vicky. What's the latest for TPS for Haitian immigrants? There's a federal lawsuit. So it was canceled by Trump. It was set to expire this month in August. There was a federal lawsuit and the judge extended the cancellation. So there is a gift of 6 months to Haitian TPS holders until February of 2026. So just barely enough time to get with a lawyer and figure something else out. So please don't waste any more time. If you're Haitian or you know a Haitian who's in TPS and they're like, yay, I got 6 more months. Great. And now is the time to figure out what you're going to do in February. Because I wouldn't put it past them to go and round up all the Haitian TPS holders because they've got your address, they've got all your information, and they've got new funding from Congress to do more raids and detentions. On that note, let's do our action tip of the week. Again, lots of us are like, what can I do about this? This is horrible. I need to do more than talk about it and call my legislators. So each of these shows, we're going to give you something to do. This is about something that's happening in Hays County, Texas, which is just south of Austin, Texas. So they are putting flock cameras being installed in Hays County. This is flock or ALPR. These are the cameras that capture people's license plates and report to law enforcement. So it's like cameras, AI doing the job of law enforcement. And this company, Flock, shares information with DHS. And so the city of Austin rejected an initiative to install these cameras in order to protect people's data from DHS. And we want Hays County to follow suit and do what Austin did. So if you live in or near Hays County, call your leaders, your county leaders, and tell them no flock cameras in Hays County, and wherever you live. If you live elsewhere, check that out for you as well in your jurisdiction. So thanks for being here with me, guys. I will see you on Thursday en español y luego next Tuesday at the regular time, which is 8:30 in English. Have a great rest of your week.